All right. So we'll give folks a little bit more time. I'll kill some time with an intro. This is the, wow, we got a nice little backlog in the waiting room here. It's awesome. Sorry. Again, for those who are new here, welcome. You are in the NSGIC 3DEP for the Nation Interest Group meeting. I'm Jordan Regine, the NSGIC 3DEP for the Nation Program Manager. Really excited for today's meeting to hear some, I know what's on a lot of people's mind, transforming our 3DEP data into hydrography data, elevation-derived hydrography. We'll go ahead and get started with the agenda. 3DEP for the Nation is a cooperative agreement between the National States Geospatial Information Council and the USGS 3D Elevation Program. We exist to help coordinate and facilitate collaboration between state LiDAR organizations and governments collecting LiDAR in states and the USGS 3DEP program. So the 3DEP success really does come from collaboration and everyone pooling funds, pooling resources, and really just working together to make this incredible, what I believe is a national treasure, come to fruition, closing in on 100% baseline coverage. So it's pretty exciting. And so now folks have nice baseline data, looking forward to refreshing that data with next gen 3DEP and transforming it into really cool products. So after we have a couple of updates and some reminders, we'll jump into today's presentation with Al Carlin from Dewberry, and he's going to talk about elevation-derived hydrography and the challenges associating with transforming this data. Still have folks rolling in, but let's see if we have. Awesome. Jason, nice to have you. Phil, always good to see you on the line. Looks like Sue is on the line. Let's go ahead and kick it off with USGS. Sue, are you available for an update?
Thanks, Jordan. Hopefully y'all can hear me. I always have issues with Zoom, but I think it's working. Appreciate everybody showing up for this presentation. I'm looking forward to listening to what Al has to say. Just a few updates for us. So many of you are probably aware we are closing in on the end of our fiscal year, so kind of closing out financials and projects, and we'll be starting working on all our statistics for the end of FY25. So I'll do the second bullet first and note, as Jordan mentioned, that we are anticipating reaching baseline completion for 3DEP in FY26. The elves are madly working on analysis, so we hope to be able to say that we plan to reach 100% in FY26, so stay tuned for that. And then kind of top of mind for us right now is the data collaboration announcement for both 3DEP and 3DHP is open. Initial project submissions are due this Friday, so very soon. And thank you all to have already submitted your project proposals. The inboxes are starting to get busy with folks turning in their project submissions, so we're very pleased to see it. And we'll be reviewing those in the coming weeks and hopefully being able to make some selections shortly thereafter. It all does somewhat depend on the federal budget, though. So be patient with us as always. I think that's all I've got, Jordan. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sue. It's really exciting to hear that you have multiple submissions in ahead of that initial deadline. That is awesome. Does anyone have any questions for Sue or the USGS team? All right, right on. Thank you so much, Sue. Really excited to see you at the NSGIC annual conference next week. On the NSGIC 3DEP for the Nation side of things, really looking forward to seeing the folks at the conference next week. We'll be kicking it off on Monday morning, bright and early, bring your coffee and your breakfast, and we'll have a 3D NTM breakout breakfast and workshop. We'll be highlighting the host state of Tennessee. Paul Dudley will be presenting Tennessee's case study on securing recurring funding. They had a couple of big wins, and Paul really did a fantastic job putting in some legwork, making relationships happen, and really demonstrating the value of this data in order to secure that next gen 3DEP recurring funding. So really excited for the conference and our programming there. We'll also be releasing the Tennessee State LiDAR highlight that week, towards the end of the week. So really want to put the spotlight on Tennessee as our host state. Facilitating derivative products, that's what it's really all about. Once you get the data, that's just the beginning. So we love highlighting use cases. We have all of the interest group meeting recordings on the 3DEP tag on the NSGIC knowledge base. Check those out. We've had a couple of really good ones this summer. And we also have a presentation from the Vermont state representative on how Vermont is using cloud optimized geotiffs and hosting data in that format. So check those out if you haven't already. And then check the 3DEP information hub for upcoming events. Looking forward to lining up interest group meetings in October and November. So keep your eyes out for those announcements. Also really excited to have that federal budget come through and really start leaning more into 3D HP coordination. I think that's top of mind for a lot of folks, especially folks on the line today, given the subject matter that Al will be discussing. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has them. All right, awesome. I love it. I always like to make room, because this is an interest group meeting, to allow folks opportunities to provide updates, accomplishments, any sort of challenges that you're facing working with 3DEP data or acquiring 3DEP data. We want to hear from you, anything that you're excited about. I will make a little space if anyone wants to give a little update or shout out to interesting things specific to 3DEP activity. All right, awesome. We got a really great attendance today. I think you guys are excited for the meat of today's interest group meeting. So just a quick reminder that initial project submission deadline for the DCA is September 12th. That's later this week. And we will see you in Nashville bright and early Monday morning. And we'll be talking all things recurring funding. So excited for that. Especially excited for today's keystone, or I guess presentation from Al Carlin with Dewberry. Jacob Mark is here in a supporting role, but we'll be talking about elevation-derived hydrography as an outdoor sport. All right, Al, I'll go ahead and stop my share and hand it over to you.
Okay, well, I will try to share my screen and we'll see what happens.
Looks good.
Well, let me try to, here we go. That's even better.
Awesome.
Okay, well, I thank everybody for coming this afternoon, and I just hope Jordan didn't oversell this. My name's Al Carlin, and on the behalf of Dewberry and myself, I thank everybody for coming, and Jordan for inviting us to talk. And if any of you, I'm going to shut off my camera to conserve a little bit of bandwidth, but if anybody's interested, I happen to be a baseball fan, and what we're looking at is a 3DEP image of the Tropicana field in St. Pete, where the Tampa Bay Rays play, and that was before the hurricane came through last year, and the roof is still intact. As you may know, the roof was blown off by Hurricane Milton. to the tune of somewhere in the $65 million range. And it's still being repaired. Anyway, I'm going to shut off my camera if I can figure out how. No, maybe not. So I'll be honest, and when Jacob Mark asked me to if I would be interested in doing a NSGIC webinar, I asked him, how long do these run? And the ones that I've been listening to seem to run about an hour or so. And I said, sure, I can talk about anything for an hour, not giving it much thought. And then about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Jordan came by and said, well, we'll pencil in a title. Oops. We'll pencil in a title. Elevation-derived hydrography is an outdoor sport. And I said, sure, that works. I can think of something to talk about as EDH as an outdoor sport. So that's what you're going to get. Just as a real brief outline, I'll introduce myself for those of you who don't know me, talk a little bit about Dewberry, a little bit about EDH, and then the role of 3DEP in the 3D elevation program, and then what I consider to be an outdoor sport. So it might be interesting, might not. I guess we'll just see. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, a real brief bio. I got my PhD at Miami University, and that's in Ohio, not here in Florida, in 1978, in theoretical population biology. And theoretical population biology is just another way of saying multidimensional statistics using genetic algorithms. So believe it or not, back in the mid-70s, we were using what's now become random trees, or talked about as random trees, genetic algorithm for determining relationships, genetic relationships among populations. Then I did a postdoc at Florida State University before I took a position at the University of Arkansas at the Little Rock campus, where I ultimately received tenure, taught and did research in 3 departments: biology, computing and information science, and engineering technology. I left the university in 2000 for family reasons and moved here to Tampa, where I am now. I took a job with the Southwest Florida Water Management District, where I managed all of our remote sensing and LiDAR data collection programs. While here in Tampa, I took an adjunct professorship at the University of Tampa, where for some reason, and it's almost incredible to me, I taught the GIS course, and we only teach 2 GIS courses at U Tampa, but I taught it in 3 departments: history, geography, and legal studies. And don't ask me how that department came about, but I was the only geographer there until last year when they finally hired somebody to replace me. As well as in biology and environmental science. When I retired from the university and the water management district, I took a position here with Dewberry as a subject matter expert, and I'm currently the president-elect 2 years into a 4-year sentence with the American Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing. So that's me in a nutshell. And that's my smiling face with an ASPRS hat on it. The obligatory slide about Dewberry, just in case you don't know who Dewberry is, or for that matter, you should know Phil Thiel, being one of the NSGIC founders. Dewberry is family owned, and yeah, the Dewberry family still owns the business. It's an AEC firm headquartered in Fairfax, Virginia, with 16 locations smattered throughout the US. The Geospatial Technology and Services Unit, which I belong to, we have about 125, maybe 130 people, specialists primarily located in Fairfax, Virginia, about half of them in Fairfax, a little under half here in Tampa, Florida, and like 9 or 10 people in Denver, and a couple of GIS specialists smattered in other places. For the longest time, Dewberry was one of my contractors while I was at the Southwest Florida Water Management District. And one of the things that attracted me to Dewberry was that they did not own any instruments, either cameras, digital cameras, or LiDAR instruments. And they found the very best tool for a particular job. Well, most recently, Dewberry purchased 3 LiDAR sensors, topobathymetric sensors, 2 seismills, and a regal sensor, and a topographic regal sensor, which are all housed right here in Tampa at the Peter O'Neill Airfield. But of course, they're deployed throughout the US. Now, along with the obligatory Dewberry slide, I do have to mention that Dewberry's participation in what was to become the USGS 3DAP program started in 2012 when the USGS contracted with Dewberry to perform the National Enhanced Elevation Assessment, which formed the basis for the 3DAP program, which was to come to fruition a couple of years later. As things would have it, in 2016, again, the USGS and NOAA contracted with Dewberry to do a national hydrography requirements and benefits study. And this study in 2016 led to some, I'm going to call them preliminary pilot programs for elevation-derived hydrography to replace the USGS blue lines that were on the quad maps. And coincidentally, and this, honest to God, this was unbeknownst to me at the time, in 2016, as the 3DAP was just getting started, John Arthur, and I don't know whether John is listening, John Arthur was the state geologist here in Florida, contacted me about, what do I think about statewide LiDAR? And I said, well, we really need a needs assessment. So John and I contracted with Dewberry again to conduct a local Florida needs assessment, basically to follow that national enhanced elevation assessment. This one, we lovingly call this one the Florida NEA study. And most recently, in 2022, Dewberry was once again contracted to do a needs assessment or requirements and benefits study for the 3D Nation elevation requirements. So all told, Dewberry as a company, as a firm, has a pretty long history with the 3DEP program, and now most recently with 3DHP. So I know I'm probably speaking to the choir, but just in case there's somebody out there who is not familiar with EDH, elevation-derived hydrography, when the National Hydrography Database was constructed in the early 2000s, it was constructed with a 2D geometry resulting basically everybody knew that we needed 3D geometry, but the cost of elevating those blue lines was really expensive. And at the time, in the early 2000s, we're talking pre-3DEP, so there really weren't very highly detailed elevation models. Now, anecdotally, in Florida, we have 5 water management districts that are responsible for watershed management. And 3 here on the peninsula, the St. John's River Watershed Management District, South Florida, and Southwest Florida, my district. And by 2005, 2006, we had all tried using the NHD in our H&H models. AHEAD for South Florida, ASWIM in St. John's, and what we lovingly call in my district, GWIS, the Geographic Watershed Information System. And we each came to the conclusion that we were modeling our watersheds off of LiDAR, and the NHD didn't fit. So we all kind of stopped using NHD for our hydrography. And in 2006, when the state of Florida funded a statewide LIDAR program. It was administered by the Department of Emergency Management, and again, we refer to this as FTN. My district, me, constructed a specification for collecting the hydrography directly from the LIDAR. I'm going to call that elevation-derived hydrography because it was a full 3D product that we needed for our watersheds. And I'll just kind of jab Sue just a little bit. That's 10 years before the hydrography study in 2008. Well, with that, and I think that this is truly great, with the 2016 National Hydrography Requirements and Benefits Study, it really became apparent that the biggest return on investment in hydrography is greatest when it does align with the elevation. And with the phenomenal success, even by 2016, of the 3D elevation program, LIDAR was quickly being collected and available in 2016 for closing in on 80% of the country. Now, with the LIDAR-derived surfaces, we could easily use these to better align the hydrography with the elevation, as well as densify the network. And what we're looking at here is a small HUC 12 in the Saluda River watershed. The top is the existing NHD, and the bottom illustrations are what Dewberry constructed for elevation-derived hydrography from the 3-depth LIDAR. Well, that kind of brings to mind, or brings to the forefront, well, how do you collect elevation-derived hydrography? Well, again, it's really nothing terribly new, but it is kind of exciting because one way you could collect elevation-derived hydrography is by stereo pairs. And we've been doing this since the mid-1960s. This is the EDH as well as contours. You could compile them from stereo images, and that's what this picture on the left is trying to show. You know, we gather stereo images, and in the range of overlap with appropriate equipment, you can see stereo, derive elevations from control points, and similarly derive land elevations in terms of contours, and identify drains. Well, this is pretty time costly and extremely time consuming. The alternative, or an alternative, once we have LIDAR, is to use a process that we call LIDARgrammetry. This became the preferred approach because you're deriving the break lines and hydrography directly from the LIDAR, but there's a horizontal accuracy issue. The horizontal accuracy of the LIDAR doesn't necessarily match in the imagery, and it may not exactly fit where you think it should fit. This presents a whole lot of issues, and it's well beyond the scope of this discussion. So I'm not going to touch on that very much. My district, Southwest Florida, we specify a manual compilation of the break lines and the drains directly from the LIDAR, either from intensity images, which is what we prefer, or from triangular regular networks. And just to remind everybody, at the University of Arkansas, we had one of these stereo plotters. We kind of kept it in the basement, thinking of it as an instrument of torture. And for those of you who are of my age, you might well remember stereo plotters like this being an instrument of torture. If you're a little bit younger, you might recall heads down digitizing off of light tables and things like this in the mid 70s and early 80s. But now, of course, we compile 2D break lines and drains directly off of imagery, as a couple of our technicians are shown here. Or we at Dewberry, we use socket set, a BAE socket set for ArcGIS for 3D compilation. And although you can see, I think you can see my cursor. The fellow here is kind of staring at an image, but you can see his topo mouse uh, with this setup right here, which is for a 3D compilation. Again, if, as I previously indicated, we at the Southwest Florida Water Management District had a hydro and LiDAR specification that's been evolving since about 2006 when I first wrote it to accommodate watershed level H&H needs of the district for our watershed information system, which is a highly modified Esri Arc Hydro Geodatabase. And I'm going to kind of return to that a couple of times. The specifications are now in their sixth basic revision, but the hydro requirements and specifications are pretty much as they were in 2006. We collect by compilation all single line drains that are 8 feet wide or less, and we elevate the FOWAG, provided that it's a dry drain. And for drains that are over 8 feet wide, we model those as a double line drains at the toe of slope. We also capture water bodies or islands in water bodies that are over half an acre to the lowest ground elevation on those features. One thing that's pretty well overlooked, and it's easy in our specification, is the line over there that says soft features. And in those soft features, we include, and you can see the soft features are in fact polyline Zs, and they can be multi-parts. And they may have a constant elevation, but those are included in that class are things that connect surface water features to each other, and they could be breaches of pretty much any kind. So again, that's part of this Arc Hydro geodatabase. And if anybody's particularly interested in 26 pages of specification reading, send me an email and I will be happy to forward you a copy of our LiDAR surveying and mapping specification from 2024. This is public record. The other alternative to manual compilation is a computer modeling. So we could I've just got to, yeah, there we go. Here at Dewberry, we've been working, and I've been working with Esri to develop a repeatable workflow that can be performed entirely in the Esri environment for lots of different reasons. And, I know we have a great push for open source and whatnot, but one of the nice things that I've always found working with Esri is that once we design a tool and we refine it and make sure it works, Esri maintains it throughout all eternity. So once we've designed, and I'm going to show you a bunch of tools that are new that we've designed for EDH, Esri is in the business of making these things work. So the workflow that I'm going to show you is in the Esri environment. And Dewberry, of course, has gone and we've taken these basic tools and wrapped them in Python wrappers to make them more accessible to staff. Now, many of the innovations that I'm going to talk about are specific tools for the pre-processing of the elevation models. And in this suite of tools, and these are all brand new, by the way, these are tools that I previewed these at the Esri User Conference in July. These are available in ArcGIS Pro 3.5 and above, and in Arc Hydro 3.4.35 and above. We have tools that we've specifically designed for pre-processing the DEM, the elevation model. One of the major tools that we designed is one that incorporates an algorithm that's called feature preserving smoothing. And what this guy does is he'll go through the elevation model and retain where changes occur in the elevation model and smooth out, not decimate, but smooth out other places. We've constructed a tool for identifying flat areas so that we can bowl them in latter processes. We've designed tools that can identify breach areas where we use a zonal statistic to find areas of depressions that are on either side of ridges, so that and they have to have drains coming into them so that we know where to put a breach. And we can obviously identify the elevations and then burn those breaches into the DEM. So these are all automated processes. Then we constructed new tools. We use a cost algorithm. Sometimes you'll see this as A star, sometimes you'll see it as A plus, sometimes you'll see it as continuous flow. And there's lots of good literature on this. Again, if you want, I'll be happy to send it to you. We use this continuous flow algorithm rather than any of what I call the D8s. The D8 or the D algorithms, the D8, the D infinity, and there's a bunch of these that are deterministic type algorithms. The continuous flow algorithm is a cost algorithm rather than one of these discrete algorithms, and we use it to construct a flow direction and flow accumulation raster. From those flow accumulation rasters, with the help of the flow direction raster, we design new tools to define where channels are most likely, streams and flow lines, and finally a stream to feature tool that this one is in Spatial Analyst 3.5 and above. And then last but not least, we designed some, again, some real specific tools to interpolate those 3D or elevations onto the lines that we're generating, and smoothing tools in the cartographic tool set to keep those lines in the channel even while we're smoothing them. So these are all new tools that, like I say, are available in ArcGIS Pro 3.5 and above. So, you know, when you think about the challenges for constructing 3D HP, here was one of the big challenges, designing a suite of tools in a GIS environment that work. Now, for those of you who know me or have heard me talk before, you know that this is one of my absolute all-time favorite quotes. And it's a quote by a British statistician, George Box. And the quote actually says, "Remember that all models are wrong. The practical question is, how wrong do they have to be not useful?" And you know, we frequently, and when I talk to engineers, I usually misquote George Box by saying something like, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think that's the shortened form that this quote that we need to keep in the back of our heads throughout the rest of my discussion. The other quote that I love is this one by Grady Broach. And Grady's an American computer scientist. And this one I absolutely love. "A fool with a tool is still a fool." And I think this is the other thing that we have to remember. And this is where, in my mind, 3DH becomes an outdoor sport, is you can do all the modeling you want. You can use all my tools. You can use all the GIS tools, whether they're open source or Esri tools. If you don't know what you're doing with them, you're still a fool. So these are the two things I think we need to keep in the back of our heads. Well, with that said, by now we all know that the USGS 3D elevation program, and as I just discussed, a little of the history. Currently, now I think the program is closing in on, and Sue, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we are just closing in like on 98, 99% of CONUS, having been LiDAR mapped at least the QL2 level. And of course, 100% of Alaska has been mapped with IFSAR at the QL5 level. So we're really getting ready for that second generation 3D. And as many of you guys probably know, the USGS is looking into refreshing these data on now a 5-year refresh rate and upgrading to a QL1 as needed. So what I want to really talk about today, at least for the next half hour or so, and feel free to ask me or put questions in the chat and maybe somebody can monitor it. But I'd like to talk about some of the things that we never talk about 3D, 3DEP and 3D HP, and why I think of it as an outdoor sport. Well, the first outdoor sport that I think about is a lever arm calibration. And this is obviously an arm, and we're looking at a lever, and we're measuring distances. Well, nothing to do with LiDAR, except that before we actually can fly a LiDAR project, we need to calibrate the instruments. And the lever arm calibration, for those of you who may not know it, is performed in the aircraft. Well, it used to be performed in the aircraft. And what we used to do, and I've done this, is you get out a surveyor's level and you measure the distance and angles between the sensor, the inertial measurement unit, and the phase center of the GPS on the planes. Well, for those of you who've never seen it, on the left is a picture of it's a Regal sensor that's mounted in an aircraft. You can see the aircraft mount around it. And we removed the hood, the cowl from the sensor. And you can see that on the sensor is marked the position of the emitter, of the actual laser. On the right side, same thing, is the IMU, the inertial measurement unit. And again, cowl removed. And you can see that right on the unit is where the measurement is being made. So, and again, you can see that that's mounted in an aircraft. You can see the rails underneath. So what one would do, and sometimes you do it as an indoor sport, in the hangar, or sometimes you would do it out on the tarmac, but we would physically measure the offsets between the IMU, the sensor, and the phase center of the GPS. Well, that's again the olden days. In the nowadays, what we do is we model it, and and here's just a picture of the software that's used to model the lever arm calibration. The curious thing for me is if you look over here, and I hope you can see my cursor move. This is a trajectory of an aircraft, the purple lines, over a calibration course. Well, that is my second outdoor sport. The bore sight there's a bore, not a bore sight calibration. The bore sight calibration is usually done as a post-processing technique where we refine that lever arm. And like I showed you now, we do the whole thing all at once, but that requires that you have a calibration course to measure while the airplane is in flight and measure the pitch, roll, and yaw while the plane is actually collecting data. Well, to do this is like I say, I think of this as a second outdoor sport, the bore sight calibration. When we performed our Florida Peninsular project in 2019, my survey team at the district and we went out and we established 3 bore sight calibration courses in the peninsula, one to serve the northern portion up in Williston, one to serve the central portion in Brooksville, and one to serve the southern portion in Wauchula. And typically, what you do is you go to an airport and survey both buildings, elevated points, and ground points. So here's an obligatory point cloud of the Brooksville Tampa Bay Municipal Airport. And the little black areas, these all around the airport are my targets. I'll show you an aerial picture of it because it's easier to see. But there's the Brooksville Airport, and you can see the runways basically going, or the runway going in a oblique direction. And that's my office, or that was my office in Brooksville. So you can see this airport was kind of in my backyard. So it wasn't much of an outdoor sport walking from my office onto the airfield. We measured all the little crosses to a high level of precision. And there you can see yours truly at the end of the one of the approaches, measuring a point on the approach. And then we measured 3D points. And this one, I've got to admit, we measured this guy, or we measured the roof of this building with the total station. It was just easier. Down at, or I'm sorry, north at the Williston Municipal Airfield, same thing. Here, I was fortunate enough to have a class of survey students from the University of Florida come out. So they helped. And in this case, we brought a large pole so that we could measure 3D buildings, or the roofs of buildings more accurately. The last one was down at Wauchula in the southern portion. And again, we measured some places on the runway. And there's yours truly again holding the pole while one of the surveyors was holding the data logger. So those are what we need to do this bore site calibration. Now, in some of the places, some of the airports, like the Williston Airport, it was really quite plush. They had nice restrooms, and there was actually some sleeping areas there. Once we got out to Wauchula, things got a little dicier. The best we could muster was a campground. And this campground was not very far from the airport, and it had a couple of fire pits and a very primitive outhouse. So it was more like glamping than camping, but still an outdoor sport for us. The third outdoor sport that I think is associated with 3DEP and 3DHP is a checkpoint survey. And this is one of those things that we don't really think about because we either let the USGS contract for it, or in our case, we contract a survey company to do it. But I've got to tell you, I've always been a big fan of President Reagan's line, trust but verify. So even though I would hire a survey company to go out and establish some checkpoints, I would go and check the checkpoints. So right now, if you're familiar with ASPRS, our specification has just been updated from the 2014 specification. There's a 2025 specification out now. And what that specification recommends is a minimum of 30 checkpoints, independent checkpoints, to validate the positional accuracy of your LiDAR, with a maximum of 120 points, even for very large projects that exceed 10,000 square kilometers. So you're looking at somewhere between 30 and 120 checkpoints for any project, and they can serve as either non-vegetated vertical accuracy points, or I'm going to use this older term, vegetated vertical accuracy checkpoints, or even horizontal accuracy checkpoints for that matter. And you can read through this slide. The cognate points are that if you're interested in reading the entire specification, it's available for purchase at the ASPRS bookstore. It's going to cost you $20 to download a PDF, or you can download a synopsis of the 2024 standards that Qasim Abdullah wrote. And again, if you're interested, please send me an email. I'll be happy to send you the link to that synopsis. Before I leave this slide, I've got to put on my ASPRS hat just for a little bit. We are working right now on replacing the vegetated vertical accuracy verbiage and specification for accuracy. It looks right now that we're tentatively going to call the replacement something like a vegetated ground model confidence. And the specifications for measuring and reporting that VGMC, which kind of rolls off your tongue, will be forthcoming probably within the next 4 to 6 months. Okay, so right now the outdoor sport portion of it is really just going and verifying survey. And if you told a surveyor to go find me non-vegetated vertical accuracy checkpoints, this is probably what a surveyor will go out and find. For whatever reason, I've always found that surveyors are not particularly willing to traipse through a whole lot of stuff, vegetation, and go very far out of their way if they absolutely don't have to. So this is what a typical non-vegetated vertical accuracy checkpoint would look like. This is where I go. And, off the beaten path. And yeah, this is a flat area. And I would expect the LiDAR to be right on here. You can see that the canopy is pretty open. And this is obviously a road going through some forest with open canopy. But this is where I would go and check the non-vegetated vertical accuracy. And I challenge you guys to think, is this where the bottom picture or to the top one? When I go in and look for vegetated areas, I've got to tell you, I have a fence rule. I'll only hop over 3 fences one way to get to a vegetated checkpoint, because that way I only have to hop over 3 points to get back. And you can see our surveyor, Jim, on the bottom picture and me on the top, looking at accuracy checkpoints in what we would consider vegetated terrain here in Florida. Okay, for the fourth, my fourth example of an outdoor sport, I want to focus on 3D HP, on 3D hydrography, 3D elevation-derived hydrography. And the blue line, dash line on this map is the Congaree River Huck 8 in South Carolina. And this is a portion of the Saluda River watershed that the USGS assigned to Dewberry to derive elevation-derived hydrography from. This particular Huck 8, along with several others, were assigned to Dewberry about 2 years ago. This little green blob, this green polygon, is the Congaree National Park, which is great for outdoor sport. And zooming in, you really can't tell from this image, but you'll have to take my word for it. The south border of the park is in fact the Congaree River. This is a picture of the Congaree River that I took in July of 2024 while hiking through the Congaree River National Park. And here's some pictures that I took along the path that I followed down to the river. And you can sort of see the path on the picture on the right. I left the visitor station, and there's a boardwalk path that goes maybe about 1/4 of a mile. And then I hopped off the path and headed straight for the river. So the first picture, the one on the left that says east, is my northernmost picture. And I was foolish because I didn't know at the time. I took pictures just looking toward the east. And then I thought, wow, I better just look south. So as I moved south, I took pictures looking toward the river. And here's another moving further south, the one on the left toward the river, and the one on the right is the furthest most south on my path. And you can see the river at the edge, or you can see where the trees stop is where the river starts, the Congaree River. So I just want to remind you that this is a process that Dewberry used to model the elevation-derived hydrography on the river. Right? We use those Esri tools. We use the continuous flow model. We use the stream to feature tools, and we interpolated and used the cartographic tools to smooth the lines. In this particular study, because we did it for the USGS, and one of the criteria for or one of the requirements was to compare the elevation-derived model to what I'm going to call a geomorphic index. And these are another suite of tools that we developed in the Esri environment to construct that geomorphic index. And again, these tools are available in ArcPro 3.5 and above. We have a geomorphic landsform tool from which we extract the spurs and the valleys. We constructed a black hat analysis, which is a photogrammetric tool, which transforms the data. We use the black hat, the bottom portion of the black hat, to extract what should be valleys. We modify the D-infinity workflow, again, to find possible flow lines. And we design, and this is like our newest tool, the multi-scale elevation percentile, which again is a pretty new statistical based tool, image analysis tool that identifies either valleys, the low 10%, or peaks on the upper 10%. So we take these, we do a little manipulation on the rasters that result. We add them together into and make them into a geomorphic index. So let's go and look at what this looks like. And again, here's our Congaree State Park, or Congaree National Park, rather. And you can see the outline of the Huck. The boundary of the Huck is that blue line. So the park actually goes a little bit beyond it. And at this scale, 1 to 63, 360 an inch to a mile, here are the existing NHD lines. These are the ones that were in the NHD geodatabase that was published out. And I'm going to kind of flip back and forth. And, if you look, you can see some agreement between some of these lines, like right in this area, and the NHD lines. And you can see that maybe there's something there. Well, what I want to do next is show you what the modeled, and these lines were the lines that were sent to and accepted by the USGS. There's the EDH lines for the same park. And you can see that there's hardly any association. I mean, there's really very little agreement between what we modeled as EDH and what was in the NHD database. I'm going to make those lines just a little darker. And unfortunately, I did not know. I didn't know where the EDH lines were when I took my pictures, but those markers are the path that I took. And of course, I've got a Nikon camera that has a GPS in it. So I'd say that those points are probably within 3 to 5 meters of where I actually took my pictures. Kind of interesting. And just to remind you, uh, starting from the north on the left, going to the south on the right, that's what I saw. Well, let's see, what does the geomorphic index have to tell us? And again, at 1 to 63, 360 inch to a mile, it's hard to see anything in the geomorphons. So I'm going to zoom in to right here, and you can see this is about where I've got a picture. So, maybe I can see something in my picture. There's my pin, and, over an RGB image at 1 to 6,000, I can't see anything. I mean, that's just dense forest. Well, there's my geomorphons. And, those are the ridges, I'm sorry, the valleys and the spurs. And you can almost see, if you pretend there might be something there, there might be something there, there might be something there. You can see there's an issue with the elevation model because kind of fuzzes out there. So that's another challenge that we need to discuss when using 3D depth data for 3D HP. So there's our geomorphons. There's my bot transformation. And again, you can see, yeah, maybe there is something there. And there might be some agreement over in this area. This one's really hard to see, so I'm going to have to kind of trace it. The D infinity, and this was with a 3-acre flow accumulation, which is what I modeled everything at. And you can see there's a flow path there, which kind of looks like it could be something with BOHAT and BOTHAT and the geomorphons. And then finally, the multi-scale elevation percentile. I don't, you really got to use your imagination to connect the dots here, but there might be something out here. So you put all these things together, and now we can really see that there's an issue with the elevation model. And by the way, Sue, yeah, this is the elevation model that the USGS accepted. This is the one that Dewberry sent back to you guys. You can see that there probably is something here where all 4 models suggest that there's probably a valley. And, 2 or 3 of them may suggest that there's something out there. So let me now turn on the EDH lines. I'm sorry, those are the NHD lines. And you can see that there's very little association between them and pretty much anything. And there are our EDH lines, which I've got to admit, if you look at it, they show a fairly good association between the geomorphic index and along here in this area. And again, you can see that, with minor exception, like right in this area, they really show very little association to the NHD. Well, so you see when my photographs were kind of coincidental because I saw this and we actually were on our way to visit some friends in Tryon, North Carolina, which generated my trip here. I saw the signs for Congaree National Park on highway on I-26, and I said, boy, I've got to stop there and take a look. So here's a case where, going out into the environment as an outdoor sport really helped me to understand what this particular environment looks like. And I encourage people to do the same. My last example, and then I'll be quiet and maybe answer questions if we have time, is field verification. And I am like I say, a big believer in trust but verify. And this particular example, I'm going to bring us back to Florida. We are very fortunate as to have 2 studies two LiDAR studies, one pre-depth, which was a QL2 level project, and one 3-depth project, a QL1 level project, over the same watershed here in Florida. We happen to have a QL2 that is a 2008 project, and a QL1 project, which was a 2018. So there's like a 10-year time span between these. And the interesting thing is that here at the district, we were very interested in this particular watershed because we also happen to have a 2016 Geiger mode LiDAR study of this watershed, which we had a great deal of issue ground truthing. So Jim and I took and did extensive ground truthing in this watershed. We derived the drains directly from the LiDAR through compilation. So we had great confidence in the compiled LiDAR drains. And then Jim and I went out and we ground truthed a couple of the elevations in the drains. So I want you to keep in the back of your head that the drains that I'm going to show you were compiled directly from the LiDAR, from the 2018 LiDAR. They were ground truthed by survey. And what we did was I generated through the EDH process that I showed you. I'm not going to show it to you again. We generated EDH flow lines using the elevation models from those two studies. I trimmed the resulting lines to the single line drains that we had ground truthed. I converted those lines to vertices, and I conflated the elevations to the elevation models from the QL1 and QL2 LiDAR data, and I generated near models. So just to show you, this is our watershed up in Safety Harbor of Pinellas County. The area over here is Tampa Bay. The area over here is the Gulf of whatever, it's either Mexico or America. And our study areas is what that area right there. I'll zoom into it and show you what the elevation model looks like. And you can see it's fairly well developed to the west. And there are several double line drains out to the east as the watershed is emptying into the Bay of Tampa Bay. And here are the Southwest Florida. These are compiled lines. Now you can see obviously some of these lines are double line drains. So I restricted my analysis just to these single line drains out here in the western portion of this particular watershed. So just to show you what the lines look like, the yellow lines are the lines that, and remember, I'm only restricting my analysis to these lines out here. The yellow lines are the lines that were generated through that EDH process from QL2 LiDAR data. Here's the lines that were generated from QL1 LiDAR data. And you can see that the geometry is pretty similar. And when I looked at the number of vertices in my control, again, just in those dry drains out in the upper reaches, I found that there were like a little bit over 8,700 vertices. In my QL2 LiDAR data, I generated about 4,700 vertices, and in the QL1 data, about 4,000. So in terms of the number of vertices, we generated about the same number of vertices from the two different elevation models, about half that were hand-clicked. Just for a basic comparison. I generated my near table by asking from those 8,000 some odd control vertices, find me the nearest vertex from my generated lines that were within 2 feet. So if you remember, we started with about 4,000 vertices in both the QL2 data and the QL1 DEMS. And when I asked how many of those are within 2 feet of a SwiftMud hand compiled vertices. You see where we generated, or we found that about 600 of the QL1 points and about 200, so about 3 times more QL1 points. And the curious thing here that I want you to notice is that the mean, and this is just horizontally, the mean distance is about the same. We're about 1.3 feet from one of those points that we actually digitized and checked by survey. And you look at the shape of the distribution, and the shape of the distribution is about the same. You look at the kurtosis, you look at the skewness. These are pretty comparable distributions. So in terms of horizontal, I think we're pretty good. We're pretty close using QL1 and QL2 data to derive these lines that were checked against what I'm going to call ground truth lines. The vertical accuracy is a different story. And, again, this is where my outdoor sport really comes into play. When we look at those vertices, the delta Z's for the QL1 data between, and remember, these are dry drains, these are surveyed versus modeled, the elevation is within, give or take, 3/10 of a foot, which is the QL1 specification. So I don't see anything to complain about here. To me, we're right about 3/10 of a foot. There are a couple of outliers, and you can see that, we do get outliers out at like 1.2 feet or 1 point, in this area out of beyond that 1.2 feet. But again, I'm not going to be terribly concerned with those. When I look at the delta Z's on the QL2 data, however, you look at the distribution, and the distribution looks pretty much the same until you look at the means. The mean now is out at 1.5 feet. And, you can see the kurtosis skewness is about the same, but the mean, median, and standard deviations are really huge. So I said, well, okay, let's pretend that, because we get some really huge differences here. So let's say that, this is QL2 data. Maybe it hit, water or something, something weird. So let me take out all of the points that are 4 feet. I'm going to remove this portion of the distribution. So when I restrict it to the delta Z's that are less than 4 feet, we get a nice normal looking distribution, which I think is great, except the mean is still up at 1.4 feet. The deviation is, the average deviation is still pretty big. Although you can see, and I think this is a good thing, that a big chunk of this distribution is between 3/10 of a foot and a foot, deviation. So I said, okay, let me go one step further and let me say, well, maybe those points that are 2 feet away are really not representative of that single line drain. So let me take just the points that are 1 foot away. So now my number of points obviously is going to decrease tremendously. It goes from that 150 some odd number down to 47. And if I look at, I still get this outlier, a couple of outliers way out here. The mean doesn't change, it actually goes up a little bit. The curve still looks pretty good because I'm getting a lot of numbers, a lot of observations now in the 0.3 to 1.3 foot range. But I still got this outlier. So finally, let me throw out these outliers. Let me throw out that one guy and see if that does anything. And not really. I still have this big hump down here in the 6/10 of a foot now to 1.2 foot range, which is a little bit above what I would expect. I still have a big number here between 1.9 and 2.6 feet, which gives me a mean of about 1.7 feet. So here's another case where if I didn't have the ground truth data, if I didn't do the outdoor sport of going out and measuring these things, just looking at the horizontal difference between a QL1 and a QL2 modeled line, I'd say these are pretty much the same. But looking at the variance in the vertical, I come to a very different conclusion. And I don't know whether Josh Greenberg or Jane Kramer are here on the call, but we kind of discussed this at the Esri User Conference. And if either of you guys are on the call, I hope you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're finding pretty much the same thing. So with that, I'm going to leave you with a couple of take-home thoughts. And for me and for Dewberry and for the vendors that are involved in the 3D elevation program, I think we're all really immensely happy with it. It's been incredibly successful in generating high quality LiDAR and IPSAR-derived elevation models. I don't think anybody can argue with that. There are several behind the scenes procedures that make the LiDAR collection possible. And I think, we need to be more mindful of these things, particularly ground truthing the data. And like I say, trust but verify your results, and especially in LiDAR difficult environments. And I encourage everybody to, get out from behind the desk when you can. It's fun to visit, and it was fun for me to visit the Congaree National Park. Fun to visit and enjoy nature and the environment. And, there are those cases where you really need to see what the environment looks like to know whether your model is any good. So with that, you can contact me at any time, acarlin@dewberry.com. Phil is always happy to talk to people. Phil Thiel at dewberry.com, Pete Thiel. Josh Novak is our program manager with the USGS. And Jacob Mark, I don't know whether Jacob's still here with us or not on this call, but Jacob's one of our project managers in California. We've constructed a couple of story maps, which are really helpful to understanding the history and how Dewberry interacts with the USGS for our 3D and our 3D HP activities. So with that, Jordan, I thank everybody for your attention, and I'll be happy to try to answer or go back and address any of the ideas that I threw out there.
Al, thank you so much. I really think that was an incredibly informative talk. And I think, if anything, I undersold it. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Al?
Well, I gotta tell you, Jordan, this was your idea, right? You threw this title at me, and I said, I think we can I think we can meet that one. Josh, I see that you're here. Can you augment anything about that last point?
I love your accuracy assessment. I mean, I haven't seen too many reports of that, the way you did it, actually on the ground, right?
On the ground.
Yeah. I guess one question, it seems, I mean, error is just always such a, it depends kind of thing, right? So
yeah,
it's good. It
I
seems
want to
like
throw
it's
up my hands at that word.
right. Like it's going to seem like a lot of error is going to be with our models. It's relative error, because if everything is off, then your flow model's still going to behave the way you expect it to.
Right.
And then it also seems like the level of confinement and the topography is also going to really be highly variable. And then I was also wondering about omission and commit. I mean, type 1, type 2 errors. It's one thing to go out and survey what you can see, but what about from that you modeled, but what about the ones that you missed from the model that you don't know about? So I guess
Right.
I just feel like it became a little overwhelming to me.
what I'm what I'm trying to get at is that we really need to go out and test these things. What seems to be, or what may make sense, or what seems to work in the office may not be what's actually happening outside in the real world.
I guess
And
one question I have is, and this is probably for everyone, like what level of accuracy do we need in hydrography versus LiDAR? So like if my THAWAG is within 10 feet, I'm probably more than happy as long as it's close, right? Because it moves even over time, and we're ultimately looking at the edges of the water. So I don't know. I guess those were some of my thoughts. I don't know
well, you
what
see,
you think about that.
one of the things that my engineers, and I'm going to, go back to our engineering issues, is that they really want to be able um, to use the hydrography in their surface water models. And it's got to fit, it's got to match something somewhere, and we've got to have water flowing in the direction that it flows, right? And what our guys found, and like what we found over in St. John's and South Florida, is that once we started using LiDAR, because with the LiDAR we can make cross sections, and engineers love to make cross sections and calculate end area volumes and that sort of thing. And when we started doing that and we found the NHD, we can't use the NHD for the conveyance anymore. And that's what drove us to looking at elevation-derived hydrography. So it's yeah, does that FOWAG have to be within a meter or 2 meters? For cartography, no. But when it comes to putting that into an H&H model that I'm going to connect to other features, then it becomes really important that, yeah, it really needs to be within half a meter or so, because that's the tolerance of most of our H&H models. I see 100 going up somewhere. Um, I'm sorry, Phil, is that your take on it? It looked like Phil Worrell was commenting.
No, wasn't me.
Okay,
All right.
sorry
Sounds
about
like
that,
someone
Phil.
agrees with
No.
you though, Al.
No, it's no, it's fascinating, fascinating analysis there, Al.
Well, like I say, I really hope Jordan didn't oversell what I was going to yabber about. I mean, again, Josh, you heard most of this at the Esri workshops,
I think it
and
was Aaron Meadows who was agreeing with you.
oh, okay, thank you, Aaron.
We also have a comment from Savon. Sorry, I don't see the full name. But I think this is a really good point, and I want to kind of add a little nuance to the point that Savon is making, and bring it back to something that you are I think really highlighting, Al, is that the best accuracy now really depends on what you are using the data for, right? And so
Yeah.
even if it's not within that half a meter, if you can get within the 10 feet that Josh was talking about, and you can use that for something, it's not necessarily that we say, hey, this data is more or less accurate than that data. It's look at what we can use this data for,
Yeah.
and the value that can come from this application. And that's how you show to the
Right.
agency and the decision makers and lawmakers that it's a program worth funding.
Exactly. I think many lose sight of the fact that the NHD that we have is the very best in the world. We really lose sight of that. Compare our NHD to the hydrography of Canada, to their data set, or that of Mexico, and there's like no comparison. However, we found that it was inadequate for our particular needs, and we went in and did something else. And I think the same is going to be true of the elevation-derived hydrography. It's going to meet some sets of needs, and it may be super for those, and it may not be as good as something else for other particular needs.
Yeah, Al and Josh, this is Sean Vaughn from Minnesota. I wrote that comment. We worked really hard to bring quality level 1 LiDAR to the state of Minnesota, and we've just about completed a complete statewide acquisition. I've been advocating, there's people in this call that know I've been advocating for LiDAR-derived hydrography, elevation-derived hydrography for literally about 20 years. I was one of a handful that really was behind and with a lot of you in meetings over the decades to see that this was really the future to go. And so we had a first LiDAR acquisition in the state of Minnesota, 2008 through 2012. When I started advocating for new LiDAR for the state of Minnesota for the purposes of developing hydrography, I found resistance. I'm still finding resistance today for exactly what I put into the chat, that we need funding to do this work, and we need funding from the decision makers within agencies to support this. And so I think they fear our technology and our profession of, well, should we invest today or should we wait for higher and greater accuracy? So my argument for the state of Minnesota is with quality level 1 and our ability to create 1/2 meter DEMs with the accuracies that I thought Al did a pretty good job, a really good job of describing there. Let's jump on this now. What's going to be better? 1/4 meter resolution in the DM isn't going to get us there. I think quality level 1 is about as really good as we're going to need. The data we have in hand, as Al just said, it's the greatest most accurate, remotely sensed data we've ever had in our profession, in our industry. Let's move on this now, has been my message in the state of Minnesota.
Right. I agree with you. I think if there's a take-home message from what we've been talking about, there was hardly any difference between modeling the flow lines off of QL1 or QL2 data. So if you've got horizontally, so if you've got QL1 data, it's just not going to get much better horizontally. Now, I'm still a big advocate of going out and measuring the elevations against what's on the ground. And if what you find meets your needs, I think you should just blow and go with it, because you may be able to refine it in future years, but our LiDAR really aren't getting that much better. The limiting factor in LiDAR is not the range that we're getting. It's the survey that we use to calibrate those ranges. The ranges aren't getting any better. They're limited by the physics of light. So the horizontal and again, I hate to say accuracy. I don't like that word. I much prefer fidelity or something like that. The horizontal fidelity to the ground and to the LiDAR, I think, is as good as it's going to get from our modeling methods.
Getting close to time. This was awesome, Al. Really want to thank you. Definitely, if anyone has any other questions, we have a little time left to squeeze them in. Happy to take them. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, Al. We'll be posting this on the NSGIC knowledge base by mid next week. So feel free to share it out. Al, this was incredible, really informative, and I think a lot of people got a lot of value out of it. So really grateful to have you here and for all the work that you've done to push forward the industry.
Cool. And if anybody is interested in serving on the ASPRS LiDAR committee, please send me your email. We meet once a month, the third Thursdays of the month. I'm sorry, it's the third Fridays of the month at noon. So if anybody's interested, let me know. Happy to add you to our committee. You don't have to be an ASPRS member.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Al. Thank you, everyone. See you next
Thank you.
time. Keep your guys' eyes open for information on the next 3DEP for the Nation interest group meeting. That's a wrap. Thank you.